The rain started just before sunset, light at first, then steady, like it meant to stay. Emily Carter stood in her kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands resting on the counter, listening to the sound as it spread across the quiet neighborhood. The house felt larger than usual, every room holding an echo of something that used to be there. She had lived in this Portland townhouse for 3 years, long enough to know its creaks and moods. It was safe, calm, predictable. And tonight, it felt too calm. Earlier that afternoon, she had told herself it would be a normal day. She worked from home, answered emails, joined video calls, smiled when needed. Nothing unusual. But by evening, restlessness had settled in her chest. She couldn't explain it. She only knew she couldn't sit still. Emily opened a drawer near the dining table, looking for batteries. Instead, her fingers touched something thin and glossy. A photograph. She froze. It was old, edges soft from time. The three of them stood close together, shoulders touching, sunlight behind them. Emily in the middle. Daniel Brooks on her left, smiling without trying. Sarah Miller on her right, eyes bright, head tilted slightly toward Emily. They looked young, hopeful, certain. Emily swallowed. She hadn't seen that photo in years. She thought she had thrown it away during one of her many fresh start moments. Yet here it was, waiting quietly as if it knew she wasn't ready back then. She carried the photo to the couch and sat down. The rain outside grew louder, tapping the windows in uneven rhythms. Emily stared at the picture, and memories rushed in without warning. College days came back first. Long walks across campus, cheap coffee, shared jokes that only made sense to them. Daniel had been steady even then, the kind of person who showed up when he said he would. Sarah had been thoughtful, always asking questions that made Emily stop and think. They had never planned for things to become complicated. It just happened. Feelings overlapped, timing failed them. No one knew what to say, so no one said enough. Life moved on. Or at least, it pretended to. Emily set the photo down and stood up. She paced the room once, then twice. Her phone lay on the coffee table, face down, silent. She picked it up for a long moment. She didn't unlock the screen. Her thumb hovered as if waiting for permission. She told herself this was a bad idea. She had built a quiet life on purpose. She had learned how to be alone without feeling lonely. Mostly, then she remembered how many nights she had wondered what might have happened if she had spoken sooner. If she had been honest when it mattered. Emily unlocked the phone. She opened her messages, typed Daniel's name, then erased it. Typed Sarah's, erased that too. Her heart beat faster, not from fear exactly, but from the weight of choice. She finally typed a simple sentence. I'm in town this week. Would you like to come over? Just to talk. She stared at it. It felt too small for what it meant, and yet too big to undo. Before she could overthink it again, she hit send. The message went through. Emily exhaled sharply, as if she had been holding her breath for years. She set the phone down, then immediately picked it up again, half expecting a reply. Nothing yet. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights glowed against the rain, cars passing slowly, their tires whispering over wet pavement. Other people were heading home, to dinners, to families, to ordinary evenings. Her phone buzzed. Emily jumped. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. I was surprised to hear from you, the message read. But yes, I'd like that. Emily felt warmth spread through her chest, mixed with nervous energy. She smiled without meaning to. A few minutes later, another buzz. Sarah, I've thought about you more than I should admit. I'll come. Emily closed her eyes. That was it. No taking it back now. She moved through the house with new focus. She tidied the living room, straightened the cushions, wiped a small stain from the coffee table. Not because the place was messy, but because her hands needed something to do. As she worked, her thoughts raced ahead. What would they look like now? Would Daniel still speak carefully, choosing his words like he always had? Would Sarah still? Notice small things, like the way Emily twisted her ring when she was nervous. Emily went into the bedroom and opened her closet. She chose a simple sweater and jeans, nothing dramatic, nothing too casual. She wanted to look like herself, not like someone trying to impress. She checked the mirror. Her hair was pulled back loosely, her face calm but pale. She looked older than the woman in the photo, but stronger too. Life had shaped her in quiet ways. She returned to the living room and sat down. Time seemed to slow. Every sound felt louder. The rain, the hum of the heater, the ticking of the clock. Emily's mind drifted back again, this time to the moment things began to fall apart years ago. There had been no fight, no sharp ending. Just missed calls, unanswered messages, and the assumption that someone else would make the next move. Daniel had taken a job in Seattle. Sarah had gone east for graduate school. Emily stayed, telling herself it was temporary. Then weeks turned into months, months into years. They had all been waiting for the right moment. It never came. Emily wondered if tonight was that moment, finally arriving late. Her phone buzzed again. A short message from Daniel. "I'll be there around 7. Sarah followed, same. Emily glanced at the clock. 40 minutes. She stood and walked to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, then forgot to drink it. She set it down and laughed softly at herself. The sound surprised her. It had been a long time since she had felt this alive and this unsettled at the same time. As the minutes passed, doubt crept in. What if this was a mistake? What if reopening old feelings only led to more questions? She could still cancel. Say she wasn't feeling well. Say something came up. But even as the thought crossed her mind, she knew she wouldn't do it. Some questions stayed with you until you faced them. The rain began to ease as evening settled in. The sky darkened to a deep blue, clouds breaking apart slowly. Emily turned on a lamp, filling the room with warm light. She heard footsteps outside, then voices low and familiar. Though changed by time, her heart skipped. The doorbell rang. Emily stood still for a second, grounding herself. She placed her hand on the door handle, feeling its cool surface. This was the moment she had invited. She opened the door. Daniel stood there first, hands in his jacket pockets. He looked taller somehow, or maybe more grounded. His hair was touched with a hint of gray at the edges, but his smile was the same. Careful and sincere. "Hi, Emily," he said. Before she could reply, Sarah stepped into view beside him. Her posture was confident, but her eyes softened when they met Emily's. She smiled, small and real. "Hey," Sarah said. "You look." Well, Emily stepped back, letting them in. The door closed behind them with a quiet click that sounded final, like the past sealing itself into the room. For a moment, none of them moved. The living room felt smaller now, filled with shared history. Emily gestured toward the couch, and they sat, leaving just enough space between them to notice the distance. They talked at first. It was easy. Safe topics, jobs, cities, small stories meant to test the air. Daniel spoke about his work in urban planning. Sarah mentioned teaching, how she liked seeing students finally understand something difficult. Emily listened, nodding, smiling when appropriate. But beneath the surface, emotions shifted and pressed forward. The rain outside stopped completely. Daniel glanced around the room. "You've made this place your own," he said. Emily nodded. "I tried." Sarah studied a framed photo on the shelf, one Emily had taken on a road trip years ago. "You still notice details?" Sarah said. Emily felt a tightness in her throat. The conversation slowed. Silence settled. Not uncomfortable, but heavy with meaning. It was Daniel who finally broke it. "I never stopped wondering," he said, voice steady. "What would have happened if we'd been braver?" Sarah looked down, then back up. "I thought distance would make it easier," she said. It didn't. Emily felt tears rise, but she didn't let them fall. She met their eyes, one after the other. "I didn't ask you here to fix the past," she said softly. "I asked because I needed to face it." They nodded. All three of them understood. Nothing had to be decided tonight. But something had already changed, and that change had begun the moment Emily asked them to come over. The knock on the door came sharp and deliberate, cutting through the quiet hum of Emily's living room. She froze for a moment, heart thudding in her chest. Every instinct telling her this was it, the moment she had been waiting for without even realizing it. She smoothed her sweater with shaky hands, took a deep breath, and walked toward the door. Outside, the rain had stopped entirely, leaving the streets glistening and quiet. It's the kind of calm that only comes after something has passed. Emily opened the door slowly. Daniel Brooks was standing there first. It had changed, yes, but subtly. His hair had a few streaks of silver now, and the corners of his eyes hinted at years of experience and responsibility. But his presence was instantly familiar. The same warmth she had remembered, the steady, grounding aura he always carried. He smiled at her, a mixture of surprise, nervousness, and something softer, something she had missed. "Hi, Emily," he said, his voice calm but carrying weight. Before she could answer, Sarah Miller appeared beside him. She had shortened her hair, cut it into a tidy bob that framed her face differently, made her look confident and mature. Her eyes, though, were unmistakable, the same gentle sparkle that had made Emily feel understood in ways nobody else could. "Hey," she said softly, "you look well." There was an almost apologetic honesty in her tone, as if she feared she might stir up memories that shouldn't be disturbed. Emily stepped back, opening the door wider, her hands briefly brushing Daniel's sleeve as he passed. The room felt smaller now that they were inside, filled with an energy she hadn't anticipated, nostalgia mixed with tension, comfort intertwined with longing. She closed the door behind them and tried to steady herself. The sound of the lock clicking seemed louder than usual, a final punctuation mark that declared this moment unavoidable. Daniel glanced around, taking in the changes to her living space. "You've made this place your own," he said, eyes softening. As they swept over the neat living room, the shelves full of books, framed pictures that Emily had carefully placed over the years. Emily nodded, unsure whether to smile or remain silent. Sarah moved closer to a corner where a photo Emily had taken on a trip stood on a shelf. She picked it up, turned it slightly in her hands, and studied it. "You still notice details?" she said, voice lighter now, carrying warmth beneath a casual observation. Emily felt a flutter in her chest, the kind that comes when someone sees you in a way you thought was long gone. They settled into the living room, leaving just enough space between them to acknowledge both the comfort and the distance that had grown over the years. At first, the conversation flowed easily. They spoke of work, cities they had lived in, colleagues, and the small victories of daily life. Daniel talked about his urban planning projects, how he was trying to make the city more sustainable. Sarah shared her teaching experiences, telling stories of students finally understanding lessons that had once seemed impossible. Emily listened and responded, careful to maintain a balance between engagement and reserve. But beneath these safe topics, there was an undercurrent of emotions they had never addressed. Each sentence carried a hidden meaning. Each pause stretched into a space where feelings hovered, unsaid but present. Daniel's gaze occasionally flicked toward her, searching for reassurance or a sign that she felt the same tension that he did. Sarah's eyes lingered on small details on Emily's hands, her posture, the way she sometimes hesitated before speaking. After a while, the conversation slowed. The safe topics had been exhausted, leaving a quiet filled only with the weight of history. Emily could feel it pressing against her, urging her to speak, to acknowledge the years they had lost, the moments that had slipped by unnoticed. She wanted to say something profound, but words felt too heavy. She wanted to reach out, but feared that even a small gesture could unravel her carefully maintained composure. Daniel was the first to break the silence. "I never stopped wondering," he said quietly, his voice steady but layered with something deeper. What would have happened if we'd been braver? Emily felt the words settle around her like a warm, heavy blanket. They were simple, yet they carried a weight of years, a history of choices made and chances missed. Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful, almost pained. I thought distance would make it easier, she admitted. But it didn't. She paused, glancing down at her hands and then back at Emily as if seeking permission to continue. To share the truth she had carried for so long. Emily's chest tightened. She had imagined this moment countless times, but now that it had arrived, it was more complex than she had anticipated. Emotions tangled inside her, a mixture of longing, regret, relief, and hope. She took a deep breath, gathering the courage that had brought them here. I didn't ask you here to fix the past, she said softly. I asked because I needed to face it. Her words seemed to hang in the air, heavier than she expected. Daniel's eyes softened, reflecting understanding. Sarah's expression shifted, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her composed exterior. For the first time in years, they were all seeing each other fully, without the masks that life had forced them to wear. Time seemed to slow in that quiet room. There were no promises made, no grand declarations, only honesty. It was raw, and yet it felt safe. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the night calm, reflective, as if the world had paused to give them space. They lingered in silence, letting the unspoken emotions flow freely. Letting the weight of years settle without judgment or fear, Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away. She didn't need to cry. She didn't need dramatic gestures or declarations. She only needed this moment, the acknowledgement that their bond, in whatever form it had taken, still mattered. Daniel spoke again, this time with a gentler tone, one that carried both warmth and a hint of hesitation. We don't have to decide anything tonight, he said, but I'm glad you asked us to come over. Emily's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. That simple acknowledgement carried more weight than any long conversation ever could. Sarah squeezed Emily's hand briefly. A small gesture full of meaning. Daniel met Emily's eyes, holding her gaze a fraction longer than necessary. Just enough to convey that unspoken connection between them had not been broken by years or distance. They stood together by the door, the night pressing softly against the glass panes. Nothing dramatic happened. No resolutions were reached. But in that quiet, understated moment, something shifted. A bridge was rebuilt, delicate but real. They had begun again, not with promises, but with understanding, a shared recognition of the past and a willingness to exist together in the present. When they finally left, the house felt different. Emily closed the door and leaned against it, breathing deeply. The echoes of their conversation lingered in the rooms, subtle but persistent. Her heart ached, yes, but it was a lighter ache now, one tempered with hope and the knowledge that she had faced what she needed to face. She walked back to the living room, picked up the photograph she had found earlier, and looked at it again. The faces in the photos smiled back at her, unchanged, frozen in time. But Emily felt something new, a sense that life had allowed them a second chance. Not to repeat the past, but to honor it, understand it, and maybe, one day, build something different. Sitting down on the couch, Emily closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle over her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. She didn't know if Daniel and Sarah would return, if they would rebuild the connection fully or let it drift away again. But for the first time in years, she felt certain of one thing. Opening the door had changed everything. The night stretched on, peaceful and calm, the kind of night where beginnings are quietly born. Emily leaned back, feeling the weight of years lift slightly, replaced with something fragile, yet resilient, a chance to live honestly, to feel deeply, and to let herself hope again. The story of her past with Daniel and Sarah was not erased, but it was now hers to hold with care and, perhaps, to continue in ways she had never imagined before. Outside, the street remained quiet. The world, indifferent to the small triumphs and tremors of human hearts, carried on. Yet, inside Emily's house, something gentle had shifted. A chapter had closed, yes, but another had begun, full of possibility, subtle promise, and the quiet thrill of a life reopened to love, understanding, and the courage to face what had long been left unspoken. Emily stayed on the couch for hours, thinking of moments she had once taken for granted, of laughter that had faded, and of emotions long suppressed. She thought of Daniel's quiet strength and Sarah's thoughtful insight, and she realized that the love she had carried for them, in its own different ways, had never really left. It had merely waited for her to summon the courage to face it. By the time the first light of dawn seeped into the curtains, Emily felt a sense of clarity she hadn't known in years. She wasn't sure where the future would lead, but she was ready to find out. The past had come full circle, not to trap her, but to teach her. And now, with the evening behind her and a new day ahead, Emily understood that sometimes, simply asking someone to come over could change everything. And in that moment, she smiled. Not because the answers were clear, but because the door had been opened, and life, finally, was allowed to continue.